was a stick in the mud and I said no voice, or well, I said I'd record it, but probably I was like maybe no voice, maybe no video, and strongly recommended that you don't do it. But how did you feel about that? I hope I wasn't too much of a stick in the mud. I think it works for me better as far as like now I don't have to think about my licenses on the line or not, as long as I'm answering things in general. And I appreciate both of you being patient with that. If I was a coach, I'd be able to do video and chit chat and provide more direct one-to-one responses, but there are certain laws and regulations, policies, procedures, ethical norms that I have to keep in mind and in order to keep my license and keep my job. I would really love to hear more about these boundary lines that you are being really careful to not cross with your license. I'm going to be oh, that's right. You said you're going to therapy school, huh? I'm going to be a licensed therapist in a few years, so it would be dank to learn more about what I'll have to keep in mind in the future. Completely understand, and I stand by you. Yeah, Emma, that's you should be learning. You know, when I was in therapy school, social media was not really a thing like it is now. Yeah, not really. Instagram was not around. Maybe Facebook. I think it was more of a MySpace era. So it wasn't as much of a thing, and I don't think people were taking it seriously. I know in our profession, my profession, things take a while to be updated or taken seriously. So there was no education really about social media and and therapy. There was like nothing. There was no live streams. There was no webinars, and so a lot of this is still being figured out. It's not exactly, some of it is codified like in law, like around confidentiality. There's obvious things we have to follow, but a lot of the stuff around social media, there seems to be general consensus that doing therapy through DMs is a terrible idea, and it really is. Doing therapy because it's not confidential. Like there's obvious things that we should not be doing that would probably put me at risk for my license. But there's other things that are kind of gray areas where, like this, like I'm teaching and I have to make sure I'm teaching and not providing direct support to each of you individually or as a group, that I'm not, crossing that line to where now it starts to look like therapy or group therapy. And so that is much more of a gray area because we're in this sort of gray area, but I just can't, it is clear that I cannot be on my end. I can't be providing therapy. I have to make sure I'm saying, and I talked to a lawyer about this actually, because I'm pretty serious about this stuff, that I cannot be giving the illusion or impression to people that I'm their therapist and that there's some sort of therapeutic relationship. So I have to be really clear about that. And that's why on the podcast now, I'm very clear about that at the beginning of every episode and at the end. And they said, yeah, I'm allowed to answer things in general. I'm allowed to use references from personally or from my therapy practice. I can do psychoeducation, just teaching about therapy or about mental health or whatever. Like that's all fine. That's all well and good. But I cannot be giving personal advice. Or if I do, that's on me. Like that's not a good look for me as far as professionality and my job or my license. So yeah, the risk is like you're not my clients, and this is not exactly a confidential platform. It's not, and so I can't establish that relationship with you as therapist and client, or do anything that looks like it. And this is kind of a gray area. It's not therapy. I think we all know that, but we are interacting in a way. And so that's why for me, if we take it a step further and we have video and audio, it starts to look more and more like we're going in a certain direction. And so that's where my red flags go up personally. And I'm like, I prefer people word things in general, but when someone says I go through this, I just have to go through that step in my mind of generalizing it. And I feel like I've been doing okay with that. That's Hugs in the background. His name is Hugs. So in my mind, it's just that cognitive step of applying it more generally.